The Bible is a really big book. And in this really big book, there are a lot of stories. What many people have a hard time with is how all of these stories fit together into one big story. Here's one way of understanding that story. In the beginning, God took a chaotic world of water and darkness and brought order out of it. He gave everything he created a job. The land's job was to produce vegetation. The vegetation's job was to produce food. The sun's job was to give light to the earth, while the moon and stars' job was to mark time. The animals had the job of renewing the earth. But humans had the job of imaging God. They alone could reflect his character and his ways like a mirror. They could also put words to the praises of the rest of creation and reflect them back to God. Why did everything have a job? Because when you're building a home, the work doesn't get done by itself. And that's exactly what God wanted Earth to become. A place where he would be completely at home. But God didn't want to live in this home alone. He wanted a family to share it with. God's family started off small. So the family home also started out small. It was a garden home. Except, do you know what the home of a god is called? A temple. And people who work in temples are called priests. God named this temple Eden, or delight. The priests reflected God in how they worked, and they reflected him in how they rested. No one was sick, no one was sad, and there were no empty stomachs. As the priests added new members to God's family, they would all partner with God to expand delight. God looked into the future. Eventually, there would be a huge kingdom of priests. The light would cover the entire earth, and they would all live together on earth forever. There was just one problem. There were other powers at work. The priests decided they didn't want to image God and spread delight. They wanted to do things their own way. So God let them. But this meant they would have to leave his temple and move into the wilderness. It didn't take them long to make such a mess of wilderness that God moved out of his temple and flooded it, as well as the rest of the earth, for their own protection. He would rebuild his temple. There was no doubt about that. And he would do it on earth, just like he planned. He would move back into a temple on earth. But first, he would have to recruit a new kingdom of priests. A new group of humans who wanted to image his character and ways and be excited about caring for and expanding his temple of delight. God made the offer to Abraham and Sarah's family. Yes, they wanted what he wanted. So God showed them where the new garden would be. There was just one huge problem. They barely knew the first thing about imaging God's character and ways. So God showed them firsthand what happens under the rule of the powers of sin. He allowed them to be enslaved by the king of Egypt. Then he rescued them from the ways of that human king and showed them a better way, the ways of King God. Do you want to do things my way instead? He asked them. Yes, they answered. And he gave them his wisdom on how to live in the new garden. He taught them how to reflect God in how they worked and in how they rested, how to care for the sick, comfort the sad, and fill empty stomachs. They made God a tent, and then later a building that reminded him of Eden, of delight. And God moved back to earth to live with them. This time, a whole family of priests cared for God's new temple home. But once again, there was a big problem. There were other powers at work. The priests didn't want to image God and spread delight. They wanted to do things their own way. The rest of God's family followed their lead. Once again, they had to leave delight and move into wilderness. Once again, God moved out of his temple, and once again that temple was destroyed. But he would rebuild delight. There was no doubt about that, and he would do it on earth, just like he planned. He would move back into a temple on earth, and he would recruit his kingdom of priests, a new group of humans who wanted to image his character and ways and be excited about caring for and expanding delight. After being enslaved by yet another king, a remnant of Abraham and Sarah's family was finally ready to partner with God. He brought a few of them back to the land. But God himself didn't move back. Other kingdoms ruled the land, and still God didn't come back. This remnant showed him they were serious about wanting him to come back. They followed his instructions perfectly, more than perfectly. But still, God didn't come back. They were tired of being bossed around by other kings. They begged for him to come. And then, when they had almost lost hope, he moved back into the smallest patch of earth yet, the body of an unborn baby. This new temple had a new name: Jesus, God's Rescue. Jesus imaged God from the inside out. Wherever Jesus went, delight was there too. He told the people to change their minds about not wanting to reflect God. He showed them God's ways, the true way of delight. He reflected God in how he worked, and he reflected God in how he rested. And he took away their sicknesses, their sadness, and their empty stomachs. Will you grow delight with me? He asked them. Live in me, and I will live in you, he promised them. Together we'll keep growing delight until it and our family fills the entire earth. Many of them came, but most of the people didn't recognize him. There were other powers at work, and most of the people liked these powers. And so one dark day, they killed Jesus. And the life that was full of delight seeped deep into the soil of earth. But Jesus had a secret. These powers had no power over him. With his death, delight had been planted in earth, for good. Jesus and delight sprang back up to life. Jesus' body was a temple that could never be destroyed. The body that had brought heaven to earth then brought that patch of earth back into heaven. Humans began to live in him, and his spirit began to live in them. This new kingdom of priests wanted to reflect God in how they worked and in how they rested. They cared for the sick, comforted the sad, and filled empty stomachs. In Jesus, they became part of God's new, indestructible temple on earth. And the light began to grow and grow and grow again. The Bible invites us to join them, to live in Jesus and accept the job of imaging God. It reminds us that together with Jesus, we can keep growing delight until one day Jesus will banish the powers, and delight in God's family will finally fill the entire earth forever. World without end.